had faced many difficulties in life as a result of how he looked. He made a habit of keeping to himself and steering clear of trouble, always careful to avoid risky situations. The boy often lowered himself into a crouch, staying hidden until his classmates walked by. He remained unaware of his troublemaking classmates' thoughts until he noticed her actions during that moment, only realizing then that everything appeared to be okay, or at least it seemed that way. As the lesson progressed, the teacher informed the students that the following class would take place in the projection room, then allowed everyone to leave. He found his thoughts constantly drifting back to the girl he had spotted earlier, known as a notorious troublemaker who always kept to herself. He couldn't figure out what was going through the girl's mind as her eyes burned with a fierce, unsettling intensity. Rumors circulated everywhere, both in school and beyond, suggesting she had relationships with men who were significantly older than her. Though he wished the rumors were false, the boy found himself unable to ignore them, especially after noticing the unusual path the girl used to get to school. Deep in contemplation, he soon noticed that the girl had already slipped out of the classroom. This signaled that it was time to leave. Regardless, considering how others lived served no real purpose. He soon realized the girl hadn't left. Curiosity filled her eyes as she wondered aloud about the whereabouts of the others. The boy offered his thoughts, suggesting that they were likely inside the projection room. The girl expressed her gratitude to him, yet just before she walked away, she mentioned the incident that had occurred earlier. Staying true to his usual behavior, the boy feigned ignorance. He grew anxious, insisting there was nothing unusual and claiming he hadn't seen anything before. Believing it was best not to get mixed up with that classmate, he decided it would be wiser to simply let the incident slip from his mind. The following morning, he observed that she took the same path to school as he did. She dismissed the thought almost immediately, noticing that his face showed an unfamiliar emotion. Questioned in her mind whether the individual who had stopped her was now gone. At that moment, he made up his mind to walk after her, a wave of self-consciousness washing over him as he realized how much he resembled someone obsessed. Despite his efforts, his curiosity got the better of him, as long as he would always escape at the slightest hint of danger, which made everyone believe that nothing bad would happen. He would be even more concerned if he discovered that was connected to dangerous individuals. If nothing came of it, he would simply let the matter go. The journey stretched on, making the boy curious if others had ever traveled this far. No one seemed to be nearby, as the girl walked alongside the river. A considerable amount of time had passed since the main character last visited that place. She wore a cheerful expression, prompting to speculate about the thoughts running through her mind. Meanwhile, his own thoughts centered on how distant the location was from their school. He considered returning, but after glancing at the time, he realized that leaving now would make his decision to trail her pointless. As he glanced back in the girl's direction, she had vanished without a trace. Anxiety surged through the boy, prompting him to sprint in hopes of finding her again. The thought of losing track of her made him fear that all his efforts would be for nothing. Desperately, he scoured the area until at last, he managed to spot her. The boy found himself surprised by how at ease the girl appeared, her serene posture catching him off guard. He found himself unable to hold back his reprimand, grew annoyed by the disturbance and raised her voice, demanding to know who was present. She noticed that was observing her. This unexpected encounter made her wonder about the reason behind his presence. The young man braced himself, prepared to sprint away at any moment. However, they lost their balance and tumbled directly down the hillside. The student wondered aloud about whether her classmate had survived. He responded that, in some way, she did indeed. She struggled to suppress her giggles, but amusement slipped out, leaving the boy startled by the discovery that he could actually make someone laugh. As he attempted to reprimand for missing class, she pointed out with a smirk that he was also absent, whether he meant to be or not. By 9 o'clock, the morning was well, and both students had unquestionably lost a significant part of their first class. While the boy muttered complaints under his breath, the girl silently observed him, convinced that his anxiety was foolish. To her, missing school was hardly worth the stress, and she saw no real cause for concern. Wondering about the cause of his fear, she inquired about his worries. It turned out that the boy's apprehension stemmed from the prospect of being reprimanded by his parents, who happened to be present at the school. Due to those circumstances, his presence was also required. Wondered aloud whether he ever grew weary of living that way, since following the same routine had always felt unmanageable for her. For that reason, she had chosen to abandon her responsibilities, avoid going to school, and spend her time gazing at the sky in a carefree manner. Whenever she started to feel bored outside, whenever she wanted to, she shut her eyes and listened carefully to the noises nearby. Noticing that the boy had already missed class, she encouraged him to give it a try as well. Attempted to push back, yet she firmly reminded him that his decision made no difference. It was already written down as part of his history. With that, they both remained side by side, and they thought it was quite intriguing how his viewpoint shifted. Everything seemed to change in that moment. The boy hadn't expected the girl to see things that way, given her usual tough appearance. If he were sitting in class instead, he'd just be tuning out another dull lesson from the teachers. Everyone nearby would fall into utter silence. In that moment, he felt an unusual surge of confidence, as if he stood above everyone else. The girl rose to her feet and questioned whether the boy was truly content with how things were, a remark that immediately drew his focus. She began to speak. They began to ramble, commenting on how strange everyone seemed and mentioning that all sorts of thoughts tend to flood their mind during times like those. She had already gone through all the troubles he listed, fears about classes, concerns over her family, even the anxiety of climbing the stairs, her mind crowded with worries. At the same time, all he could focus on was how near her face was to his thoughts completely consumed. Flustered, he managed to mumble his agreement. As she went on with her speech, she insisted that all the guilt was meaningless. She found herself ideally placed to make her move. She continued to speak. He was told that his actions made him unique, and in that moment he truly did feel extraordinary. The girl's heart overflowed with affection, visible to anyone who cared to notice. From that point forward, as described, the secret became something the two of them carried together. He found himself drawn to the mystery concealed beneath the girl's shirt, a secret she likely had no intention of revealing to him. The girl noticed his lingering gaze and smiled, her eyes lighting up with amusement. She understood that he was watching her closely and pointed out that his idea of being special seemed to involve skipping class just to observe everything she did during their conversation. It seemed as if he could peer straight into all the secrets she tried to keep concealed. Just then, his phone began to ring, shattering the uneasy silence. He reached out to grab it, only to realize it was simply the alarm going off. The girl observed him intently as he became flustered, feeling relief that the ringing phone had come to his rescue. Until she eventually became just like. Laughter erupted from them. It amused her to see how a simple ringtone could make him so frantic. Laughter already made her sides ache. Found himself laughing along, although he couldn't quite figure out what everyone else found so amusing. Later, when he returned to school, he noticed the girl behaving just as she always did, her expression unchanged. She had drifted off to sleep as he stood by her desk, his gaze landing on a slip of paper. The message on it invited both of them to skip class together once more. The situation sent the boy into a state of panic, as he was an obvious academic overachiever who took his schoolwork very seriously. All he felt was a growing sense of worry about what lay ahead for him in school. As the final moments of class ticked away, the teacher began to bid the students farewell. Reflecting on the events of the day, the protagonist noted that had been absent from 2 classes earlier that morning, likely choosing to skip once more. Truthfully, this absence brought the protagonist a quiet sense of relief, as it meant they could focus on their studies without any disruptions. He never completed his thought, as the girl suddenly appeared before him. The sight of her appearing almost like a phantom caught him off guard. She reached out to him, her face as indifferent as ever, simply asking about his plans for the break. Though her tone remained unchanged, it was clear she hoped he would spend time with her. Because he lacked the confidence to stand up for himself, he did whatever the girl asked. He found her waiting at the school, looking a bit taken aback by where she had decided to meet. Wondering what she was up to, He muttered that since she was already at school, she might as well go to her class. Unexpectedly, she agreed with him, which was not how she usually responded. Realizing the conversation had reached its end, he began to take his leave. However, the girl brought up the topic of a cat. He was left bewildered, unable to comprehend her words or understand what she meant. He had always considered her to be an unusual girl, but it never crossed his mind that she might be heading toward life as a psychiatric patient. At that moment, she gestured toward a cloud shaped like a cat, and suddenly everything became clearer. Gestured toward various other clouds in the sky, imagining shapes like airplanes and lions among them. She raised her voice and tried to get his attention. She wondered about his activities outside of studying, but he couldn't figure out the reason for her curiosity. Without any warning, she brought up the question. The girl's sudden curiosity seemed to appear for no clear reason. He mostly spent his time reading manga or scrolling through his phone, not really doing anything else. He was curious about the games, though his uneasiness showed clearly in his demeanor. Clarified to the girl that the games involved horse racing, sparking her curiosity. He found himself curious about her decision to take a seat, feeling an unexpected pull because of it. He did his best to keep his attention on what was being said, despite the difficulty. At the same time, the girl brought up the idea that he could send her a friend request, pointing out that she enjoyed playing that type of game as well. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that the boy would never act that way. It seemed someone was trying to steer the conversation in a new direction. The girl revealed that she was already aware of the type of manga he preferred. She leaped down from her spot to approach him, displaying one of her consoles as she landed. The protagonist was taken aback by her sudden nearness. Despite her surprise, she retreated a step and remarked on the situation. He preferred manga that were best enjoyed in solitude. The boy grew increasingly anxious, his nerves bubbling inside him as if he were a pot of simmering tomato sauce. The girl found his responses amusing, believing his gaze made his feelings toward her quite clear. She even accused him of being a pervert. Couldn't figure out how she had found out, especially since he believed he had been careful to keep it a secret. He questioned silently to himself the precise moment she had discovered the truth. Embarrassment overwhelmed him to the point he avoided meeting her gaze. Despite his discomfort, the girl behaved as if nothing unusual had happened. Without giving any details about what he wanted, he simply instructed the other person to give it to him. This made the boy think it must be a reward, maybe payment for how often he had been caught looking at her buttons. He went ahead and did it, feeling a bit foolish as he explained that his wallet only held 2,000 yen. However, didn't seem to mind at all. She urged him to give it to her right away, noticing that Banana was unable to do so. He apologized repeatedly, his words tumbling out in a rush. Although the girl assured him that everything was all right, she reminded him that he needed to pay closer attention to her in the future. Hesitated, questioning whether it was truly acceptable for them to be sharing phone numbers at this moment. Showing little patience, informed him that if he wasn't satisfied, removing her contact would simply put an end to everything. However, the situation turned out to be more complicated than that. She had been the very first person he added to his contacts list, apart from relatives. That fact alone made his nerves flutter with anxiety. Even so, the girl let him know that he could decide whether to keep it or erase it, and from her perspective, either option was perfectly fine. Additionally, this method proved far easier than having to summon him repeatedly, with small handwritten notes. Rising to her feet, she gestured for the boy to come along and signaled him to remain silent. The student grabbed his hand and urged him forward, impatient with his sluggish pace. At that moment, a higher-ranking officer appeared. Earlier, they had gone to that location to report that the area was restricted, but had found no one present. It was likely that the surveillance cameras had shown something incorrectly, or perhaps the activity had occurred in a hidden corner outside the camera's view. And huddled side by side, doing their best to remain out of sight. The girl instructed the boy to remain silent until the man had gone. Unable to speak, he remained stretched out on the pillows they had discovered. Found himself overwhelmed, unable to grasp the situation before him. His attention was drawn to the surprising softness of his surroundings. Meanwhile, the authority figure shouted loudly, insisting that he was aware of their presence and demanding that the students reveal themselves. It was now the moment for the group to separate, believing that dividing would help them remain hidden more effectively. The main character became completely absorbed by the fragrance that lingered around, while the shadows enveloping him grew deeper. As a surge of emotion washed over her, the man's shouts continued without pause. His patience had already worn thin, and irritation simmered beneath the surface. The character referred to the protagonist as foolish. If that had been the case, they surely would have been discovered. Thanks to the girl's swift decision, she placed both of them on the ground at that very spot. Staying hidden from the man's view, they watched as he decided there was nothing unusual and continued on his way. She expressed her relief that everything had turned out well, then checked on to make sure he was all right. The boy offered an apology, expressing his regret. He would have departed from that place sooner if it had been possible. The girl playfully mocked him, warning that if he spoke with such an expression, it would only end up upsetting her. The girl's actions baffled her classmate, who had assumed she considered him nothing more than an overly attached oddball. Doubtful, he questioned whether she believed his claim that he would have left sooner if he'd had the chance. She instructed him to shut his eyes before taking a bite. Despite his hesitation, he went through with it. In response, she tapped him lightly on the forehead. The boy had been convinced he was on the verge of experiencing his first kiss, but events took a different turn. Regardless of the outcome, expressed her gratitude for his presence, believing it added excitement to the situation. Despite the embarrassment it caused him, it was. Since the next class was about to begin, they needed to move quickly and didn't have much time to spare. The day was meant to be tranquil, as it was a holiday with no lessons scheduled. In theory, everything should have been quiet and relaxed. Seizing the moment, decided to take a stroll. He faced an unexciting task that needed his attention that day. As he traveled, in the plaza, they unexpectedly crossed paths with. She offered him a friendly greeting. Someone questioned his actions. Although he attempted to remain composed, his efforts quickly crumbled when he noticed the girl's choice of outfit. Snapping back to the present, he mentioned that his mother had sent him on this task. The girl remarked that mothers could be quite troublesome at times. He took a seat beside his classmate and wondered aloud about her reason for being there. The girl responded mysteriously, refusing to reveal her purpose and calling it a secret. This response left him feeling slightly annoyed, especially since he had already explained his own reasons for coming. He chose to stick around for a while, uncertain of what else to do. Mentioned that she was willing to share the truth about why she was at the plaza, though she doubted if he was ready for all the details. Hearing this, he sensed the situation was more involved than he thought and suggested they just drop the topic. That seemed good enough for him. He realized he had to leave quickly. However, before he could go, the girl noticed the drink he was holding and wondered aloud if it was a new flavor. He confirmed that it was and explained that he'd picked it up to give it a try. Then, he took a sip, believing that a serious error had been made. The steak turned out to have an awful flavor. Rose to her feet, expressing her desire for a drink and announcing her intention to purchase one for herself. She wondered aloud about where the boy had purchased it, and he replied by mentioning that he had gotten it from a vending machine not far away. Before approaching the machine, the young man commented that the juice tasted awful. Nodded in agreement, noting that she could sense it just by observing his expression. This very realization had been her motivation to give it a try. The main character found the idea completely illogical and decided to stop her from spending money on it. He offered his bottle to her, giving her the chance to try it and judge for herself if it was any good. He trembled with shame, appearing utterly helpless. Despite his uncertainty, he felt a strong desire to assist the girl. On the other hand, she showed little interest in accepting any help. The character felt uneasy about taking anything from people they didn't know. Since had offered, she decided to accept and took a small sip. She checked to see if he was okay with it, and he assured her that he was. He mentioned that she was welcome to finish the entire drink if she wished. The girl swallowed hard, bracing herself for what would come next. They appeared to believe there was nothing wrong with it. In reality, She offered a warm smile and wondered aloud about his dislike, pointing out that the taste was actually quite pleasant. She expressed her gratitude, returned the bottle to him, and walked away, leaving him puzzled by her actions. She had recently finished her juice, so they decided to move on to the following activity. He was unable to grasp how that might influence him. Noticing that the main character simply gazed at the bottle without taking a sip, she questioned whether he planned to try the juice at all. Began to feel uneasy. Believing that her saliva might have been on the object, the girl clarified that this was the reason she had asked whether it would cause any issues. He surely knew what an indirect kiss was. Hearing those words caused the boy's anxiety to grow even stronger. His face flushed as brightly as a red pepper. Struggling to find the right words, he managed to indicate his determination to drink it regardless. He needed to wait for a short while, but it didn't bother him, and he reassured everyone that he was all right. Meanwhile, the girl attempted to restrain herself, yet she was unable to contain her emotions. He chuckled as he looked at the protagonist's expression, then wondered aloud about her actions. The boy burst out laughing, but the girl quickly moved aside, expressing that his actions caught her off guard. His confusion only deepened, while she clutched her stomach, feeling the ache from laughing so intensely. Admitted that she was surprised to discover how humorous the usually serious boy from her class could be. She expressed her gratitude to him for the moments they had shared. Realizing it was time to leave, she offered a farewell and walked away, leaving the boys behind, their faces frozen in stunned confusion. Once he became aware that no one else was around, he unscrewed the cap and exhaled into the bottle, hoping to evaporate the traces of the girl's saliva left inside. Unexpectedly, she appeared behind the boy, quietly observing the events unfold. He was making an attempt at something. She passed a fresh bottle too, mentioning that it was new. He had explained to her that she didn't have to return the favor, but she still wanted to thank him for the juice he had given her earlier. True to her earlier words, she disliked accepting gifts or favors from anyone, making her uncomfortable whenever someone tried to give her something. She was comfortable offering them as well. As she moved nearer, she proposed an idea. They hoped they would spend time together like that again in the future, because spending time like this felt worthwhile to her, and eventually she offered her final farewell before leaving. The boy's cheeks flushed a deep shade of red, as vivid as a ripe pepper. She felt a surge of excitement at the thought of spending time with her once more. He needed a moment to understand the girl's suggestion, but he couldn't dwell on it because time was running out. His mother reached out to remind him not to stay out too late. The following morning, as he headed to school, a sudden downpour drenched him, making him certain that he would arrive after the bell. He regretted ignoring his mother's advice to bring an umbrella, wishing he had listened now that things had turned out this way. He stood in the pouring rain, his clothes clinging to him from being completely soaked, when a voice suddenly caught his attention. Turning, he saw who was just as drenched as he was. Acting as though the downpour was nothing out of the ordinary, she offered a casual greeting and inquired if he was all right. The girl expressed regret about her disheveled appearance. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that the boy's repeated glances nearly escaped her attention. The rain showed no signs of letting up. The rain continued to intensify. The boy glanced at his phone, searching for different routes to reach school. Uncertain about his options and realizing that running wouldn't help, he felt stuck. Without an umbrella, he knew he would only end up drenched if he tried to make a dash for it. Wondered aloud about its anxious expression, prompting to reveal his concern about being late for school. She found his response impossible to comprehend. The falling rain offered a perfect reason for her to skip class. She believed it was perfectly fine to skip studying on a day with weather like that. That was her honest opinion. Feeling uneasy about the girl's proximity, he admitted to himself that her assumption was likely correct. Expressed her doubts about the existence of official permission to miss class, yet she admitted that weather as severe as that day's rain would make a convincing reason. The boy felt confused, unable to understand since he had always obeyed every rule. Regardless of the situation, he found comfort in realizing that he wasn't the only person ditching class by himself. The girl's words had given him that sense of relief, and he felt grateful for it. As he glanced back at her, she suddenly unleashed an enormous sneeze that startled him. The loud noise was unlike anything he had ever heard before. He realized he was hearing words from her that he had never imagined she would say. Startled, she quickly spun around and insisted that he erase what he had just overheard from his memory. Uncertain and uneasy, he found himself at a loss for what action to take next. He noticed the intensity in her gaze and, because of it, silently vowed to keep her secret. As another strange noise echoed nearby, he tried to distract himself, deliberately looking away from the girl's face. He reached into his bag, rummaging around in search of an item to occupy his attention. In an effort to keep warm, the boy removed his jacket and draped it over the girl's shoulders, making sure she would not feel cold. Felt a jolt of surprise when she received the item. She accepted it and expressed her gratitude, noting with surprise that it was spotless. Despite the fact that it should have been clear to the boy who she truly was, he failed to realize it. She was getting ready to switch into different clothes. She instructed the boy to face the other way, yet she began before he even had the chance to respond. Raised his voice, questioning whether she would simply wear it over her current outfit, and she clarified that doing so would only make it dirty. He couldn't begin to understand why the girl chose to start changing clothes in the middle of the street, and he silently hoped she would hurry up and put her clothes on. Nervousness was evident in his demeanor, and he found himself stealing quick glances from time to time. Despite everything, behaved as if nothing was out of the ordinary. The boy felt a strong urge to continue staring, but he struggled to resist the temptation. Despite the girl's constant teasing throughout the process, noticed at the end that they both fit the same size, and he found that detail rather pleasant. The fabric pressed snugly against his chest, leaving him uncertain about the fit. He wondered about the reasons behind her constant comments, but chose to brush them off despite feeling self-conscious. Expressed her gratitude for his generosity, while the boy reassured her that she had no reason to be concerned. She emphasized that she had already removed her inner layers, which helped her feel warmer. This could signify just one possibility. He found himself unable to focus on her words any longer. By the time he became aware of this, the girl. He realized the other person had moved in uncomfortably close, causing a wave of shyness to wash over him. She playfully provoked him, questioning whether he wanted to know more, yet he quickly dismissed any interest. Meanwhile, nervously toyed with the zipper. The boy's cheeks grew increasingly flushed as the girl continued with a gentle touch. It became clear to him that she meant every word she said. She moved nearer to him, her shirt hanging open with the buttons almost completely undone. He swiftly moved her aside, insisting that she wasn't allowed to act that way and urging her to stop immediately. She really deserved to hold herself in higher regard. Despite his words, he completed the action by sliding her zipper all the way down. With her controller gripped tightly, she fixed her gaze on the boy, prepared to begin the game. Before setting it aside, admitted his mistake and expressed regret, now understanding how foolish his actions had been. He hadn't intended for those words to come out. He simply acted fast to make her pause. She tried to make it seem convincing so that the girl would trust her. The decision had already been made, leaving no room to change it. Insulted the boy, calling him a fool as he repeatedly expressed his regret. As they continued on their way, the girl fastened her jacket over her chest with a safety pin to keep it shut. To shift the conversation, she suggested that they visit the convenience store rather than head to school. She had a craving for a truly delicious cup of coffee. On a particular day, the teacher summoned to her office to express her concerns about his declining academic performance. She inquired whether he understood the reason, and though he attempted to clarify, he obviously wished to protect, who remained seated before him, her face composed and untroubled. Seizing the moment, the woman began discussing their frequent lateness and missed classes, pointing out that the girl had been absent far too often. She quickly made up an excuse, claiming that she had been unwell recently. The woman continued to express her concern, insisting that their schoolwork had likely suffered because of what had happened. As a result, she decided that both students needed to complete additional assignments to catch up. In essence, she assigned them detention together. However, the teacher permitted them to refer to their notebooks if they encountered any difficulties. They had to begin immediately to keep from losing any more time. Nervousness was clear on the boy's face. Even when he glanced over his notes, he would remain completely clueless, since in the end it was nearly impossible to grasp the material without being present in class. While he tried to solve the problems, his sense of hopelessness intensified. The sheer number of questions overwhelmed him, and some were so difficult that he couldn't even decipher them. At the same time, sat across from him, appearing confident and making steady progress with her work. He barely glanced at anything as he went through it all. The teacher apologized, explaining that she needed to leave for a meeting, so the two students would be on their own for a bit. Meanwhile, the boy struggled to focus on solving the math problems. Although he struggled with it, he felt certain that completing the task was not something he would accomplish in the near future. The moment the door clicked closed, burst into a joyful celebration. She suggested to the boy that they could enjoy some time together. He felt caught off guard by how quickly her mood changed and wondered aloud about her meaning. This was supposed to be their chance to catch up on all the things they had missed before. However, the girl seemed completely indifferent. He rose to his feet and wondered aloud about her destination, prompting her to explain that she was only heading to the bathroom. She then extended an invitation for him to join her, but the main character clearly refused. After she gently shut the door behind them, the girl's actions helped the boy relax and feel more comfortable. With all distractions gone, he resolved to give his full attention, yet something unexpected quickly unsettled him. The troublemaker standing behind him pointed out that he had answered one of the questions incorrectly. She gripped a tiny bag of treats in her fingers. She caught him off guard with the unexpected rustle of plastic and her abrupt arrival. Brought out some ice cream and eagerly offered it to him, believing he could use a treat since the study session would last a long time. The boy wondered aloud why she wasn't working on her own assignments, but she had already completed hers and was now focused on checking his homework. Many things about it were problematic. After she managed to discover a way inside, she took it upon herself to show him the method she had used. The boy's attention was fixed on the buttons of the girl's shirt, which seemed uncomfortably near. Without warning, he stepped back and quickly expressed regret for having startled her. The girl's ice cream began to drip onto his worksheet, leaving sticky trails as it melted. This situation caused his nerves to tighten. Went on to elaborate her point. She handled the task with unexpected skill. Once the task was complete, expressed his gratitude to her. The girl's eyelids drooped as exhaustion overcame her, making it impossible for her to stay awake any longer. He found himself admiring her commitment, noticing that she hadn't tried to skip class or abandon their plan altogether. Rather than giving him the answers, she showed him effective ways to learn. She possessed an air of mystery that surrounded her. As the boy's curiosity continued to grow, he gathered the assignments and carried them into a different room, where he paused for a moment. The girl stood up, but unfortunately, things did not go as planned. He accidentally let an object slip from his hand, causing it to fall beneath the desk, so he reached down to pick it up. He simply wished that she would choose not to do it. He regained consciousness while still below. Despite his best efforts, his eyes kept drifting toward the girl. The task seemed straightforward. One only needed to concentrate on keeping their gaze averted. They hurried to snatch the item without delay. He hurried toward his goal, drawing close just as the girl stirred from sleep, unintentionally disrupting his approach. She wore a stern look on her face as she crushed him. He attempted to clarify that everything had been a mistake. He simply wished to reach for his eraser, but as he explained himself, questioned him about where his gaze had wandered. Following the awkward incident, the pair succeeded in submitting their completed assignment. Still, the teacher immediately spotted the mark left by the popsicle on one of his pages. The scent of chocolate lingered in the air, prompting her curiosity about whether he had been snacking. He shook his head, insisting that he hadn't eaten anything. After excusing from the classroom, the teacher instructed to remain behind because she needed to clarify several points to him. She proceeded to reprimand him, emphasizing how The importance of this type of assignment demanded a serious approach. After some time had passed, the boy started to feel unwell from repeating the same routine. A wave of heat washed over him, his body burning as if gripped by a fever. This happened because he had recently come down with an actual fever. He often stayed up late into the night, trying to catch up on the subjects where he had fallen behind. Despite the exhaustion, he kept working on extra assignments to keep his grades from slipping. On top of that, his attendance was getting worse because he had been missing classes. He realized he needed to put in every effort to set things right. Nearly lost his balance in the center of the road, but reached him just in time. Sweat soaked the boy completely and his. The classmate's face was filled with concern as she gently held his shoulders, guiding him on the walk back to his home. Upon their arrival, the group encountered the boy's sister. Stepped forward and told the girl her name. The sight of in such a condition left her stunned, and a scream escaped her lips as the delinquent began to clarify the situation. He stumbled along the sidewalk, his face drained of color. The girl expressed regret for her absence and for causing to escort him to that place. Expressed her gratitude for the help, though the girl with dark hair appeared unfazed and mentioned she was able to escort him to his room. Even as the remaining girls voiced their objections, clarified that she had already the school staff, and warned that continued disagreement would only delay her return to school further. Somehow, her reasoning managed to sway sister. She opened the door inviting him inside, and promised to contact their mother. The woman found it unexpected that her son had a friend who showed such concern for his well-being. Once the boy had been tucked into bed, his classmate assured him that all preparations for sleep had been completed. Meanwhile, his condition was visibly dreadful. With little else occupying her time, chose to settle down next to him. At that moment, memories began to replay in the main character's thoughts. He recalled how others frequently criticized his declining grades, despite his ongoing efforts to study. The teacher pressured him relentlessly to heed adults' guidance, even though he always remained silent. He also recalled the time when a group of troublemakers at school targeted him, though he never understood why. The impact on his grades became clear, leaving him with a sense of discouragement. His confidence dwindled a little more every day. Because of his appearance, he figured focusing on his studies was the best choice. He hoped that if he kept his head down, the others might finally stop bothering him. Once the results from the general test became available, nobody had expected the person who ended up taking first place. She was an exceptionally beautiful girl. The individual possessed unusual eyes and typically kept to themselves, showing little desire to connect with others or form friendships. He was always by himself, much like the young man they spoke of. The way a person's reputation shifted simply due to assignments struck her as odd. Began to wonder whether raising his grade might change things for him. There was a chance that he would also experience some relief. He became acutely aware of just how drained he felt. At that moment, started to become aware of his presence and urged him to join her in skipping class. He jolted awake, his voice echoing in a terrified scream, shaken by a confusing dream that blended hope and fear. He entered the room and saw perched on the edge of the bed, absently turning the pages of a book. She caught off guard, swung her hand and struck his face. He had no choice but to recline once again. Regardless of the outcome, she mentioned that she had already contacted the school to inform them about what had happened. Choosing to overlook that information, the main character questioned her about whether she had truly been noticeable during the earlier years of school. She appeared completely unaware of it, as if the memory had never existed for her. Expressed his frustration about his grades, feeling that his efforts and studying never seemed to make any difference. In contrast, the girl consistently held the highest marks, yet despite her academic success, she frequently missed classes which puzzled him. She grew silent, moved higher up on the bed, and firmly told him that her reasons were personal and not something he needed to concern himself with. The boy was forced to say he was sorry. At this moment, the situation had become quite uncomfortable for them. The boy's excitement continued to grow. He grew even more anxious as she drew nearer to him, still. Paid little attention to those minor concerns, believing that the only reason they were together now was because she had made that choice herself. He had made that decision himself, and it was important for him to remember that fact. Once more. The boy expressed his regret, and she observed that his fever had nearly disappeared. She decided to remain there, wanting to be prepared if anything happened. He noticed the girl lying beside him in the same bed, her posture catching his attention. The situation unsettled him so much that he found himself compelled to ask. She seemed to be standing just a little nearer than what felt comfortable. Reached out and delivered a quick flick to the protagonist's face. She insisted that he should stop his antics, pointing out that since he was unhurt, she had every reason to go. In her mind, they had already wasted enough time on the matter. There was silence, then without warning. The boy wondered aloud about his next steps, questioning if returning to school was the right choice. Since her classes had already begun, the girl simply shrugged off her concerns and resolved to attend the following day instead. Once more, acted according to her own desires. For that day, the main character felt thankful for the situation. His gratitude quickly faded, however, when his sister suddenly rushed into the room, eager to know the identity of the attractive girl who had accompanied him home earlier. At the same time at school, the teacher looked around the classroom, puzzled by the girl's absence and silently questioning where she might have disappeared to. She had mentioned her intention to escort the boy to his house before coming back. It was obvious that nothing of the sort had occurred. Once he had regained his strength, the boy found himself back in the classroom, enduring yet another lesson on an unknown subject. However, everything had changed that week. Starting from the previous Friday, began showing up to every single class. As soon as the break arrived, he hurried to collect his lunchbox, but the abrupt sound of his classmates slamming the table made him jump in surprise. A sense of fear swept through the entire crowd. She tried to guess what destination the girl might have in mind. She always carried an air of mystery wherever she went. After a while, the teacher for the afternoon session entered the classroom and instructed the students to open their books to the page assigned for reading. It seemed his friend's company would be short-lived, as his mind remained fixated on the icy look she had given him before. It seemed like she was about to speak, possibly hinting that they should skip class, but if that were true, she could have simply spoken up. The boy's desire to be included in such an event showed a certain foolishness on his part. The teacher saw that was unable to sit still, so she approached his desk and suggested another chance to make up the missed lesson. However, was not interested. He quietly apologized and did not speak again during the remaining classes. When everything was finally over, exhaustion weighed heavily on him, yet his responsibilities were not finished. Just then, a message appeared on his screen, catching him off guard. To his astonishment, the sender was. She was genuinely suggesting that he should miss class. She had gone so far as to share her live location, making it easy for him to track her down. Despite his reluctance and the long moments he spent wavering, he suddenly rushed out of the classroom. Since his 6th period was biology, a subject he felt comfortable studying on his own, he figured he could make up the lesson later. He found her waiting, positioned in the familiar way she always chose. She appeared somewhat taken aback when she noticed the boy was there. He struggled to breathe normally, always seeming short of air. The main character couldn't figure out the reason for the girl's shocked expression, since he was always trailing behind her like a loyal puppy. When he brought up what had happened before, the girl passed him the treat she had shown earlier. Its scent filled the air, instantly sparking excitement, and seeing his response made grin with amusement. The treat had a strawberry taste, which was among the girl's preferred flavors. It seemed to be something unfamiliar to the boy, as he had never sampled it before. Observing this, couldn't help but chuckle, finding the situation quite obvious. The boy made a clumsy attempt to conceal his fondness for that particular candy, but his efforts were obvious. Observing this, she urged him to go ahead and enjoy the treat without hesitation. He remained puzzled by the fascination surrounding everything, yet the girl's thoughts stayed a mystery to him. She wondered why anyone would miss class just for a simple meal, especially since food was always available. More than that, she questioned why he continued to miss class with her every time. Shifting the conversation brings up something else as she. Skipping class in that spot always brought a special kind of joy. It was peaceful, and that was all that mattered. It was the first occasion on which she had ever revealed this. He realized he needed to keep it to himself and not tell anyone. The boy was left feeling embarrassed, experiencing a sense of importance he had never known before. The girl quickly grabbed the candy from his hand and questioned whether he had approached her solely for that reason. She pressed him for an answer, refusing to let the matter go. With a piercing gaze, she began to explain that the biology lessons scheduled for that day would present a significant challenge. She felt exhausted from constantly preparing for the college entrance exams. The protagonist felt a sharp pang after hearing those words. He had never suspected that she was getting ready for something like that, as her actions had never given any hints. In contrast, he realized he wasn't making any plans or taking any steps himself. Offered him a wish for good luck, remarking that passing would be a difficult challenge. The next day arrived. They decided to skip class. On this occasion, the group chose to toss small stones into the river that flowed close by. Hurled her stone across to the far side, catching off guard with her impressive throw. Realizing he needed to surpass her effort, felt a surge of determination rise within him. He recognized that he wouldn't discover his own limits unless he gave it a shot. His pride as a man wouldn't allow him to be overshadowed by a simple stone. He unleashed his throw with full force, not restraining himself in the slightest. The object landed in the river without rebounding at all. He made multiple attempts. Had already begun to make fun of him. Only those who managed to cross the river were mentioned. Counting came easily to the girl, but when the main character attempted her method, he still couldn't succeed. Deciding it was pointless to continue, suggested they head to the convenience store together. Before they left, her new classmate asked for a short break to recover his composure. Suddenly, the girl loses her footing and tumbles over the slippery rocks. The girl suffered a serious injury, causing the boy to feel concerned as he wondered whether she required assistance. She wanted to refuse, yet her finger moved on its own. A small amount of juice trickled down, catching her attention. The injury was minor, so she simply tried to dry it by blowing on it. However, advised against this, mentioning that he likely had a bandage in his backpack and offering an explanation for his concern. After discovering the object, he gave it to the girl, who secretly believed he was making too much of the situation, even though she was skilled at working with stones. She fumbled with the band-aid, unsure of how to apply it properly. Noticed her struggling and volunteered to help, mentioning that it was difficult to manage by oneself. The girl extended her hand, allowing her friend to assist her. Her hands were so graceful and refined that their beauty alone made the main character feel uneasy. She observed in silence as the boy acted. He performed his task, his face flushed as brightly as a ripe tomato. She appeared truly grateful for everything that had been done. After completing the task, he was overwhelmed with exhaustion, as though he had just scaled a towering mountain. Examined the neatly wrapped bandage and praised the boy's handiwork. The boy responded by sharing that his sister often ended up with scrapes and bruises, so he had plenty of practice tending to her injuries. In addition, he often sustained injuries himself, which led him to carry band-aids wherever he went. His gaze lingered on the bandage, treating it with the reverence one might show a treasured possession. The protagonist reminded her that it was almost time to head to the convenience store. However, she replied that she had changed her mind and no longer wanted to go. As for their earlier rock-throwing contest, she decided to call it even. It seemed that his sense of manliness remained unchallenged. Later that day, while the girl soaked in a soothing bath at home, her mind drifted to the band-aid. She realized she had forgotten it would peel off in the water and began to consider whether she should ask the boy to help her reapply it the following day. At the same time, in his own home, the boy was overcome by a fit of sneezes. His sister, worried about her upcoming game and determined not to fall ill, ordered him to keep his distance. Back in PE class, the teacher explained the day's activities while gazed on, seemingly distracted. Caught off guard by being there, the girl clarified that her attendance was necessary to avoid having to take a makeup class. She disliked physical education, finding the heat unbearable and the uniform even more uncomfortable. Wanting to escape, she told the boy to come with her and then dashed away with unexpected speed. He found it impossible to maintain that speed. The main character's eyes remained fixed on the girl as he struggled to focus on his own running. Kept moving at the same relentless pace, while the protagonist was on the verge of collapsing from sheer fatigue. She behaved as if it didn't bother her at all. Before continuing forward, she glanced back over her shoulder to check whether the boy remained behind her. After that, a short side trip was taken aback, having assumed she had simply gotten lost. Believing it was wiser to alert her, he chose to quicken his steps. Still, he eventually spotted, quenching his thirst at a nearby fountain. He couldn't understand how she appeared so stunning, even while perspiring and sipping water. Once she finished, she turned to her friend and wondered aloud why he wasn't hydrating as well, pointing out that it would help him recover. As he finally began to drink, the sensation was almost. He gulped down the drink as if he had been parched for days. At that moment, the girl remarked that he, too, had ended up straying from the intended path. Had already discovered the path, while the protagonist had spent the entire time believing she was wandering aimlessly. She went on to clarify that the sweat from running always bothered her, which was why she felt the need to pause and rest. The boy remarked that she simply needed to run more quickly, while the girl responded with a casual shrug, explaining that the spot was nearly the same as the original route, so nobody would notice anything unusual. She instructed the boy to take a seat. Someone in the vicinity caught sight of the motion. Several of their classmates stood close. Choosing to remain calm seemed like the move, while the rest of the class rushed forward, clearly exhausted and soaked in sweat, stood steady and unaffected. She gave the boy a reassuring glance, signaling him to stay calm as well. If their teacher had shown up instead of their classmates, getting caught would have been certain. He expressed his regret, yet confessed that the girl's presence made him feel nervous and overwhelmed. Smiled as she admitted that she had actually enjoyed herself, so she didn't mind at all. Regardless of the circumstances, they realized they needed to continue onward. At the same time, experienced an overwhelming sensation, as though his heart might leap right out of his chest. As the group gathered again at the trail's end, whispers spread about being the last to arrive, despite her earlier head start. The boy simply felt relieved to have survived the challenging path. Sometime later in the locker room, felt a surge of pride after managing to skip class once again without getting caught. It was finally time for everyone to return home. The main character felt a jolt of surprise, noticing that 2 hours remained before class would end. However, the girl clarified her early departure by admitting her exhaustion. Although he was included, his approach contrasted sharply with theirs. From a distance, a girl from school quietly observed, her curiosity piqued by the mysterious boy who always seemed to speak so freely with. His name always appeared at the top of every school ranking, and the entire student body constantly buzzed about her achievements. The girl's striking beauty and soulful eyes made her even more noticeable among the others. This unique presence drew the girl's gaze immediately. The moment and the girl first encountered each other left a lasting impression. Merely requested to get by, yet that small interaction sparked a fixation within the girl. Despite being in different classes, the stalker constantly kept under her watchful eye. She was aware of her fondness for coffee and desserts, avoided wearing earrings in the summertime, and kept to herself when not at school. During their second year, she initiated a conversation with a classmate named. Witnessing this, the girl became overwhelmed with frustration, noticing that treated her as if nothing was out of the ordinary. She had spotted the pair leaving the park together, while the marathon was happening the previous day. She struggled to come to terms with the fact that her classmate, who seemed almost divine, was spending time with someone so unusual. Observing how frequently they engaged with one another, she attempted to reassure herself that their closeness was merely a result of their assigned seats. She snapped out of her daydreams when the teacher raised their voice, instructing the class to settle down. The teacher explained that the upcoming period would be dedicated to self-study, as they would not be present. While that was happening, drew the girl's focus as he politely requested to get by. The unexpected interaction sent her heart pounding. She offered an uneasy apology, her discomfort evident. She felt a rush of excitement after sharing even a brief conversation with the dark-haired girl. At the same time, enjoyed the rare peace in the classroom, appreciating the absence of so he could concentrate on the lesson. However, the quiet was soon interrupted when his classmate messaged him, wondering about their assignment in the room and remarking that, since it was a self-study period, going home seemed pointless. The classmate then suggested that he stay at school, explaining there was something important she needed to find out. The final message he received was the one that ultimately persuaded him to leave. The girl closely observed each movement the main character made. They questioned whether it was merely chance that both individuals exited the room simultaneously. However, the circumstances seemed suspiciously well-timed. This led her to wonder if they might be in a relationship now. The mere thought of it had already taken over her mind. She realized that events like that were rare even in manga now. Without meaning to, she spoke her thoughts aloud, startling the other students around her. Embarrassment washed over her as she broke into a cold sweat, wishing she could disappear. Stood outside, patiently anticipating the boy's arrival. She remarked that she hadn't expected him to appear, given his reputation for always following the rules. However, explained that anyone in his position would have been intrigued by those messages. He was eager to find out what she needed to make sure of. She simply instructed him to come along, completely ignoring the worries he had voiced. At the same time, the unknown observer silently speculated about their destination. Later, back in the classroom, she claimed she needed a trip to the restroom because she felt unwell, yet her true intention was to secretly trail behind the pair. There seemed to be something happening behind the scenes. She planned to document every detail, determined to find out the precise destination they shared as they walked down the hallway. Led the boy into a hidden area, a location completely unfamiliar to the newcomer. As the girl stepped inside, she realized she had never known this room was there. She discovered that no one was present. The absence of the others left her in disbelief, and shock washed over her. There was an unusual atmosphere in that room, suggesting that more was happening beneath the surface. On the other side of the door, restrained, making sure he stayed quiet. Her nearness unsettled him, causing a wave of nervousness to wash over him. Despite his uncertainty, he found himself on the verge of acting, whether or not he truly intended to. Meanwhile, the girl was overwhelmed with anxiety inside that room. Found herself increasingly baffled by the subject of their conversation. Suddenly emerged behind the girl who had been secretly following, causing her to jump in surprise. Seeing her fear, gently soothed her nerves, explaining that there was no need to be afraid and reassuring her that there was nothing going on between her and. The news hadn't been shared yet, and this filled the girl with eager anticipation. Once that matter was settled, the girl with dark hair instructed her companion to return to the classroom before her. Meanwhile, the boy found himself utterly confused by the situation, particularly when the second girl shot him a glare filled with animosity. Wanting to understand, he questioned about the conversation, but she simply brushed him off, assuring him it wasn't something he needed to concern himself with. He remarked that his desire to secretly be with her made him feel like a sinner. As the semester drew to a close, the teacher bid farewell to the class, expressing hopes that each student would enjoy their upcoming break. Showed no interest in anything happening around her. Observing her quietly, concluded that staying out of the situation was the wisest choice. With spare time on his hands, he headed out to run errands at his mother's request. After completing the shopping, he wandered into a bookstore, something he hadn't done in quite some time. There, he encountered a welcoming staff member who invited him to join for lunch. The unexpected event startled him, and finding himself on his own, he chose to go along with it. The girl had a job at a newly opened, where waitresses wore maid costumes to attract customers. The moment he entered the room and recognized the situation, his anxiety grew even stronger. Although she remained reserved, the girl expressed her gratitude for his visit and summoned a maid to show him the way. The maid appeared anxious, and the boy beside her seemed utterly stunned by the situation. The girl with dark hair blushed intensely as she found herself needing to clarify matters for her supervisors, who questioned the distance between the pair. Claiming to be the older sibling, she used the opportunity to express her gratitude to the boy for caring for her younger sister. The two bore no resemblance to each other, which left the main character feeling as though he had stumbled into the plot of a stereotypical manga story. Trying to shift the conversation, he inquired about the best item on the menu and agreed to try the rice and omelet dish topped with a special love decoration. Stood to fulfill his order, requesting that he wait briefly, but her sister intervened, reminding her that there was a crucial step she must not overlook. Something was clearly reluctant to do. Although she found it embarrassing, the task was simply one of her responsibilities. With a dramatic roll of her eyes, she announced her intention to prepare his meal with extra care and affection. Overcome by humiliation, she hurried away. In a quiet moment alone, her sister confided to how grateful she felt for his presence. She explained that she had arranged for to get the job, believing it would help her since was very timid. She thought that staying at home throughout the entire break would not be beneficial for. Since she was currently taking a break from college, she found herself frequenting the cafe more often. Eager to complete her education, she often dreamed about launching her own business. It turned out that she had been assigned as tutor. This explained why the girl's academic performance remained high despite her frequent absences from class. In addition to her intellect, she was strikingly attractive. As she stood up from the table, the older sister expressed her relief that her sibling was doing well. She found a friend at school and requested that he spend time with her whenever possible. The pair shared a brief conversation, which left looking intrigued about their discussion. They chose to keep the matter hidden, feeling that there were many differences between them. The boy, distracted by his own thoughts, was taken by surprise when the girl handed him his plate. Seized the moment to mention how impressive sister seemed, a conclusion he'd reached simply from their brief conversation. The girl, still curious, asked once more what the topic of their discussion had been, but assured her that nothing out of the ordinary had been said. Then shared that her sister had launched her own business while she was still a college student, admitting she couldn't understand how her sister balanced studying with her concern for others. Hearing this honest admission left surprised. Her sister quickly joined the conversation once more. A crucial reminder about love crossed her mind. The older sister passed a ketchup bottle to her sibling, urging her to speak her mind openly. Clearly anxious, the younger girl repeatedly reassured herself that she was simply fulfilling her responsibilities. Her expression twisted with visible revulsion as she considered her next action. Noticing her hesitation, advised her not to push herself, despite his sister's persistent urging. Suddenly, an unsettling gleam appeared in his eyes as she insisted that everything was all right and assured them she could handle it. She wondered aloud about what design to make with the ketchup, but the main character, eager for the moment to end, replied indifferently that any drawing would suffice. After giving the bottle a quick squeeze, the girl attempted to come up with an idea, but things certainly did not unfold the way she had hoped. The boy found himself at a loss for words, uncertain of how to respond in that moment. At that moment, he saw tears welling up in his eyes as she offered an apology and insisted she was willing to try again. He found himself caught off guard by the unfamiliar situation, unsure of how to respond or what words might ease the tension hanging in the air. He made a conscious effort to avoid increasing her embarrassment. He stuffed the omelet into his mouth. Wanting to ease the tension, the main character mentioned enjoying how the sauce contrasted with the dish. Hearing this, started to relax. She burst into laughter as she pointed out that the man's mouth was smeared with ketchup. Following the uncomfortable exchange, decided to walk away from the scene. Just then, cut him off, inquiring about his availability for the weekend, and fortunately, his schedule was open. She extended a flyer toward him, offering it into his hands. She regretted accepting the ticket for an event she couldn't attend, not wanting it to go unused. Since was unsure about whom she hoped he'd invite, the girl clarified that it would be a good idea for him to ask his sister. He knew he needed to handle the drinks with caution. He was left utterly at a loss, his composure shattered. During the festival, sister scolded him loudly, criticizing his outfit and insisting that he looked inappropriate. Despite her complaints, he felt powerless to change anything. Despite everything, the girl persisted, explaining that if she were in situation, she would feel embarrassed too, causing to feel uncertain about himself. He had already been taken aback when the girl immediately agreed to join him, though he considered it a positive outcome. As evening arrived and lanterns lit up the festival grounds, the boy wandered through the bustling crowd, realizing it had been ages since he last attended such a lively gathering. Now, his main concern was locating the person he was supposed to meet for the evening. When he noticed her, a familiar warmth crept into his cheeks, just like it always did. She appeared stunning, drawing the attention of several boys around her. Since her sandals made walking difficult, she had chosen to arrive ahead of time. Wanting to avoid traveling after sunset, she left her house while it was still light outside. He passed the ticket to her, and she admitted that her excitement had grown even more. The girl and her companion walked away, leaving the group of boys standing there, silently observing their departure. She had. The character possessed an unusual knack for winning at the games set up at festival booths. She collected a handful of exciting rewards such as gift vouchers, whereas the boy ended up with nothing more than a single piece of gum. She excelled at anything related to food, and together they made a perfect pair. During the festival, they paused at various stalls to sample a wide array of foods. He appreciated that they had included her, and noticed an unexpected sense of calm settling over him. At that moment, the pair agreed it was time to pause and rest. Felt content with the booths they had explored so far, deciding it was time for a new activity. Although the boy didn't quite understand her reasoning, he trailed after her regardless. The pair found themselves standing in a strange patch of grass that seemed a bit suspicious. The protagonist repeatedly questioned the reason for their presence in that place. Responded by saying that they were creating memories together. The place felt truly strange. It was the kind of situation where a boy and a girl could create memories together. Remembering her words, attempted to dismiss those ideas, realizing he wasn't prepared for anything like that yet. The girl motioned for him to come closer, letting him know they had reached their destination, his sister. She recalled how someone had brought up that location earlier, and she felt glad they arrived ahead of the show's beginning. The woman firmly directed the boy to take a seat. He followed through with his decision, and soon the fireworks lit up with bright, sparkling bursts. A glimmer appeared unexpectedly in the sky, catching the boy off guard. Upon noticing the look on his face, she had questioned him about whether he understood her reason for bringing him to that place, and now the answer was clear to him. He realized that the idea had never once crossed his mind until now. Upon realizing the situation, questioned whether he believed they had arrived with a different purpose in mind. She gazed intently at him as the boy struggled to steady himself. She seized the opportunity and quickly captured a photo. Took a picture of the two of them and sent it to him. In the photo, he appeared awkward, as if he expected they might kiss or something similar. Not wanting to make him feel self-conscious, lightheartedly remarked that his expression made her wonder what he thought would happen. He tried to clarify, saying her sudden closeness had simply caught him off guard. During this, he thought about his sister, who was likely having fun already, and mentioned that she had been the one to encourage to come. He explained that he wanted the photo so he could show it to his sister as proof they were together. As enjoyed her candied treat. Apple wondered aloud whether he believed they had shared any memorable moments. Naturally, he had no intention of admitting it. However, the recollections he carried from that day would not match the ones she held. At the beginning of the new school term, silently pledged to rely on luck, almost as though she were appealing to the universe for assistance once again. The girl walked into the school ahead of schedule and took a seat beside. At the same time, the teacher was busy organizing where everyone would sit for the new semester. She decided that students who struggled to see the board, as well as those genuinely interested in learning, would be placed at the front. The remaining seats would be assigned randomly. To keep things organized, she created a chart listing all the seats and their numbers. Since everyone hoped to claim a spot in the front rows, chaos erupted among the students. Having already forgotten about this seating policy, was beginning to accept that he and would not be sitting together. The girl fixed her gaze on him, her eyes filled with curiosity about why he chose not to volunteer for a seat at the front of the classroom. Internally, he dismissed the idea, thinking it would make him look too studious, and instead inquired about her seating preference. As soon as the teacher assigned all the seats in the first row, the moment arrived to begin the drawing. Was the first student to rise. She revealed that her main objective was to secure a specific seat number. She appeared unusually resolute for such an easy task, drawing the anxious eyes of her classmates. As she marched ahead as if participating in an important ceremony, confusion swept through the room. Even found himself caught off guard by her unexpected action. Was fortunate to achieve her goal. The spectators watched in awe, thoroughly impressed by what they witnessed. People around her couldn't help but notice a new energy about her, agreeing that the most deserving person had claimed the right seat. As most students finished picking their numbers, the boy realized he didn't mind where he would sit and had already let the thought slip from his mind, knowing that seat assignments would be shuffled again next term regardless. He nearly let sorrow overtake him, but then it struck him. This was his final opportunity to reclaim his life before. Throughout that semester, his focus had often drifted to her, making it difficult for him to concentrate on anything else. Despite everything, she continued to playfully provoke him. The two of them exchanged messages non-stop, even when they were apart. He concentrated whenever he needed to direct his attention. He constantly found his thoughts drifting back to her. At that moment, someone urged him to move faster. It turned out to be the girl who couldn't hide her fascination with. She grumbled about not allowing him to take the vacant spot beside the girl. He insisted that he didn't want it. There were only 2 seats remaining, and one of them was the spot he had used before. And both watched him intently, their expressions serious. Couldn't understand it. He wondered how anyone could overlook the fact that the dark-haired girl's beauty was extraordinary, as if her very presence was something remarkable. The thought of sitting close to her made feel unique and important. She had gone to great lengths just for the seat exchange that summer day, holding on to her good fortune for that moment, until announced he had picked seat number 25, which was directly beside. Spirit broke beyond repair. She searched for every possible argument against it, yet ultimately realized that nothing could change the outcome. The teacher interrupted her, announcing that it was time for everyone to move to their assigned seats. Glanced down at the number he was holding, his expression filled with unease. He wondered whether fate was favoring him or playing a cruel trick. Fixed him with a wide, unsettling smile, prompting him to wonder what was going on, and the girl explained that, for once, he had picked something out on his own. The previous term, he had ended up sitting next to her only after trading places with another student who didn't like sitting there. He hadn't expected her to recall that detail, yet assured him it was impossible for her to forget. She had hoped to continue the conversation with the boy, but shyness got the better of her. Despite her hesitation, he encouraged her to elaborate. Uncomfortable, she quickly steered their discussion in a different direction. She reasoned that by doing this, it would be simpler to persuade him to skip classes during the second term. However, this posed an issue, as he insisted that continuing such behavior would eventually land him in trouble. He dismissed the idea with a scoff, clearly enjoying the activities they shared despite any claims to the contrary. Her statement only heightened his anxiety, yet fortune continued to favor the girl. She reflected on the promises she had set for herself that morning and realized that getting up early had paid off. This semester promised to be unforgettable. The following day, as she crossed the bustling school courtyard, a teacher singled out, criticizing her for wearing a skirt that was much too short. She replied that she would handle the situation eventually, though he had grown used to hearing that excuse. She couldn't understand why he was so upset about something that seemed minor to her. The girl insisted her skirt was already longer than it used to be. However, to the man's eyes, nothing about it had changed. Observing a student challenge a teacher in such a manner felt unusual. Nevertheless, she questioned whether he was interested in measuring it or something similar. If he truly wanted to, they would be able to take action immediately. All eyes were fixed on him, as curiosity filled the room about whether he would really follow through, while the girl assured him that there was no issue if he decided against measuring. She spun away from him, her back now facing his uncertain gaze. Desperate to finish what he had started to say, he reached out, his voice catching in the air as he tried to stop her from leaving. Felt a surge of fear rise within him as he watched the girl's unsettling actions. Her presence alone sent chills down his spine, leaving no doubt in his mind that she was truly frightening. The teacher addressed the main character, inquiring. He waited for his name to be called during class. Someone pointed out that the boy's bangs hung so low they hid his eyes, insisting he needed to fix it right away. Although he hesitated, he followed the suggestion, feeling uncertain since no one had ever mentioned this issue to him before. At the same time, sat in the cafeteria, passing the time. The teacher's irritating demeanor had not changed, and after the previous complaint, she had made her skirt a centimeter longer. She never intended to miss her class that day. Despite her efforts, the man's presence proved intolerable, once she had eaten the last of her snack. Noticed the disappointment on her face. Throughout the lesson, his mind wandered between two pressing concerns, his reluctance to trim his hair and thoughts of who had already transferred schools. Earlier, his expression had been filled with intense anger, her eyes blazing. Gazed at the page outlining the hair-cutting rules, his heart filled with resentment. In that moment, a significant realization dawned on him. The girl still lacked the necessary release signature. While she sat in the cafe, a strange man came up to her and inquired if she was by herself. She claimed she was expecting company, though her words didn't match the situation. Unbothered by her answer, the man insisted he had a car and offered to give her a ride, but before he could finish his offer. Before he could reach her, the girl warned that she would contact the authorities, startling him and making him hesitate. He attempted to ease the tension by explaining that he only wanted to ask her to spend some time together, nothing more. Arrived without warning, catching everyone by surprise. The situation left the man uncertain about his desires. The protagonist clarified his intentions, expressing that he wanted to speak with the girl present. The man departed, now convinced that the girl was already in a relationship. Grateful for her friend's timely intervention, the girl nonetheless questioned his true reason for coming. She recalled sending him a message about something supposedly urgent, even acting secretive just to avoid attending class. In response, he retrieved the signature logbook, pointing out that her name was absent from its pages, meaning she wasn't required to adjust her skirt since there was no formal complaint. However, the girl clarified that the staff had been monitoring her since her first year, choosing instead to send warnings directly to her teacher. She conveyed this with a calmness that barely masked her distress. Realized she should have known that and felt slightly embarrassed. She decided to use the moment to inquire about what the boy had done to receive a note as well. At that point, the boy mentioned that his bangs had grown too long, so he decided they needed a trim. Questioned his delay in taking that action, catching him off guard because he never imagined she would support such an idea. She wondered aloud if there was a particular reason behind his hesitation. In response, he admitted that many people found his eyes unusual, and this made him feel more comfortable when they were hidden. The girl couldn't hold back her laughter as she wondered aloud whether he had hidden them simply out of fear of others' opinions. For some inexplicable reason, she found the situation hilarious. She believed that what truly mattered was far more significant than how long her skirt was, and she found herself curious about why he seemed to focus on her needs above his own. Mentioned that, had he been in her situation with the teacher, he would have valued having someone stand up for him. The girl hinted that he likely believed her clothes were fine at that length, playfully provoking him and causing his cheeks to flush even more. He responded indifferently, insisting that his concern stemmed from witnessing her argument with the teacher and feeling uneasy about the way the man addressed her. Suddenly, rose from her seat with little warning, announcing her intention to go to the bathroom. She had in fact entered that place. She found herself unable to stop thinking about what the boy had said. He had expressed his concern, and when she returned, she found him waiting in the same spot, so she decided to offer him a small gift, a cup of coffee. A modest, unexpected prize appeared. Claimed she was giving him the present because he had skipped class without needing her reminder, though the boy protested that he never meant to skip in the first place. They had passed the point of no return and could not turn back. On a different day, as they once more avoided attending class. As the girl observed the gentle movement of the river, she remarked inwardly on the calming effect it had on her. Despite this peaceful moment, she realized that this marked the third occasion they had missed class since the start of the semester, causing concern to grow. Meanwhile, ridiculed the boy in her thoughts, believing that his constant worries explained why others often labeled him as timid. Later on, while the class was in session, the teacher singled out the main character because he had missed so many classes. Shocked to find himself in so much trouble, he listened as the woman warned him that continuing this way during the next semester could lead to expulsion. She added that, unless he made some changes, a conversation with his parents would be necessary. Their appearance left much to be desired, falling far short of anything considered good. No one could understand why the boy had begun missing so many days, but it was clear that a change was necessary before things got worse. After leaving the classroom, he felt dejected, his mood weighed down by the harsh reprimand he had just received. Although he usually ignored the importance of showing up, this time he realized he needed to handle things the right way. However, something still held him back. The sight of his expression made it irresistible to tease him about slacking off again. Despite everything, the boy attempted to show bravery, assuring everyone that he would remain in class that day. The girl, caught off guard, remarked that his behavior would not lead him to success. He described what had happened with the teacher, yet the girl responded that the protagonist had already experienced that situation, which made her puzzled about her continued absences from class. However, offered to clarify everything if the protagonist agreed to follow her to a different location. The pair made their way up to the rooftop together. Pointed out that visiting the school on designated rest days might actually be beneficial, reassuring him that there was no need to worry about the teacher's warning. She found it even more astonishing that he hadn't realized this before, since it was common knowledge among most students. Now, at least, he finally understood the reason behind his own strict adherence to the rules. Observed the look that appeared on the boy's face. She attempted to reassure everyone that everything was fine. Additionally, she had been tracking the number of days both of them had missed, and based on her notes, they wouldn't be required to repeat the school year. Nevertheless, this arrangement required her to go to school even on the weekends. The girl insisted that attending class, while the building was deserted, made sense to her. Things might have improved, yet the main character remained doubtful, since everyone preferred to avoid school whenever they had a day off. Despite the circumstances, pointed out that his frequent absences would draw suspicion, as the teachers were already keeping a close eye on him. Because his academic performance had declined, he realized it was important for him to put an end to his current behavior. As delivered the speech, he looked at the other person with a blank, emotionless expression. The situation caused anxiety to well up inside the boy. After that, the girl spoke up. If that were true, she would no longer ask him to skip class with her. However, appeared to have something else in mind at the moment. The girl insisted, wanting to know if he had not just mentioned that someone was watching him. He encountered something that likely displeased him and made an attempt to protest. He found himself at a loss for words, his mind consumed by thoughts of He admired the beauty of the girl with dark hair and noticed how happy he felt whenever he was by her side. He found that his memories of their time together were filled only with happiness. He soon realized that appeared unwell. Wanted to know what was happening, but before he could get an answer, the girl broke into laughter. She told him that his confused reaction was simply too cute. Meanwhile, stomach ached, and he couldn't figure out why the troublemaker seemed so cheerful. Because her face tended to look intimidating most of the time, it was unusual to see her expression soften. This change only happened when she and the protagonist were sneaking away from class together. Strangely enough, she reserved this special look just for him, and that left him feeling unexpectedly happy. Returning to their discussion, reminded him that he had mentioned they could face serious consequences if he continued to skip classes with her. He hesitated, struggling to make her understand that she had always been the only one skipping. It already felt unusual to her that a girl of her type would ever speak with a boy like him, and that oddness made her. He wondered if his thoughts were still caught on those matters, while the girl leaned forward, reassuring him that it truly didn't bother her. Spending time by herself instead of attending class. With his presence, she realized that skipping class together turned out to be much more enjoyable. Feeling it was unfair for her to make such suggestions with an innocent expression, she adjusted her offer, explaining that she would only ask him to join if they made sure not to exceed the allowed number of absences, so they wouldn't risk having to repeat the year. Rose to his feet and announced that their upcoming class would be English, a subject he disliked and struggled with. Was taken by surprise when those words were spoken. Even he appeared taken aback by what he had just said. The girl remarked that it was unusual for him to suggest skipping, noting how much he had changed. However, the boy quickly attempted to clarify that things were not as they seemed. Despite it being their day off, she couldn't resist poking fun at him, remarking on how eager he seemed to join her at school. She intended to wait for it, and after she departed, the boy remained behind, lost in contemplation about whether he had truly become different. Doubted that he himself had changed, and instead believed that was the one who had become different. He had no intention of sharing this thought with her. That weekend, as prepared to leave, he bid farewell to his parents and his sister. His sister quickly noticed he was wearing his uniform on a day off and immediately questioned him, hinting that he must have gotten into trouble and now had to atone for it. Offered little explanation, simply denying her suspicion before saying his goodbyes. Despite his response, his sister could tell her guess was correct. Welcomed the boy with a cheerful morning greeting. He hadn't expected her to show up ahead of time, yet she urged him to move quickly and come with her. He nodded in agreement, though he noticed the usual way into the school was missing. His classmate clarified that the main entrance was always locked on weekends. Together, they walked into the school and exchanged greetings with the secretary. They wrote their names on the attendance sheet as proof of their presence. Although they appeared to be old friends, their relationship was not as close as it seemed. After that, the woman passed them a bucket, informing them that their duties for the day included scrubbing the bathrooms and the hallways. Felt caught off guard by this assignment and had no desire to take on janitorial chores. Pointed out that the workload had grown, and it was fault. Upon arriving at the bathroom, the circumstances were undeniably grim. The girl passed them a set of supplies, allowing them to begin their task immediately. She decided to tackle the right side, leaving the left for him to manage. Together, they set to work scrubbing the sinks, though his expression made it clear he resented having to clean as punishment for missing class. Once the sinks were spotless, they moved on to the corridors. As the protagonist walked through the empty school, he was struck by how unfamiliar it looked without the usual crowds, the halls now filled with an unsettling quiet. Despite the eerie atmosphere, he felt curiously calm and took the opportunity to comment on this unusual sense of peace. He also found his attention drawn to the girls. After some time had passed, the group paused their work to sip on juice. The protagonist felt uneasy, uncertain whether they had permission to do so. However, appeared unconcerned. She enjoyed the freedom that came with being alone, appreciating the chance to handle her tasks however she pleased. He raised the glass to his lips and tasted the juice. He found himself unable to respond to what he had just heard. Before he realized it, the moment arrived for him to move on to the second floor. When he glanced at the bathroom sink on the second floor, he understood that this time would be far more difficult than before, even appeared somewhat unsettled by the situation. The two of them shared the same grade, but second-year students always seemed revolting to them. They spent an extended period thoroughly cleaning. They continued their tasks until both were finished, but the girl completed hers before the MC and offered him a wish of good luck. As this happened, caught sight of something unusual outside the windows. A cluster of boys energetically competed in a lively game of soccer. Appeared far more enthusiastic about the prospect than about the task of cleaning. Meanwhile, questioned what those men thought of their presence. Was left bewildered at that moment. Then, she moved nearer. His nerves fluttered, just as they always did, as he caught the subtle suggestions that something more secretive might be happening upstairs, while a different group carried on with their own activities below. After everything wrapped up, the group hurried to tidy the senior year hallways, and when they finally stepped into the classroom, it unexpectedly came across a student conversing with a girl who had arrived to offer assistance. The pair observed in silence while the boy mentioned that the girl had forgotten her notes in the classroom. Unsure if she was permitted to enter as a first year, the girl clarified that she simply needed to retrieve her notebook. And huddled together inside the cramped janitor's closet, overhearing every word of the ongoing conversation outside. She instructed the boy to remain still, hoping this would prevent anyone from finding them. The main character found themselves in a difficult situation. At the same time, out in the classroom, the two strangers lingered. Noticed that the classmates she recognized were preoccupied with their own activities and not paying attention. She seized the chance to move in even nearer to the boy, The situation grew worse, much worse. Now she was so close that the main character could sense her breath against his skin. As the girl glanced downward, she saw that the boy's joystick was poised for action. Displeasure flickered across her face, but before she managed to speak, the main character hurriedly explained that it wasn't what she assumed and insisted he had no control over it. Without warning, a piercing scream echoed from within the janitor's closet. The sudden noise caught the attention of the couple sitting in the classroom, leaving them startled. Emerged, shouting in agony, while the two students wasted no time seeking answers. They hurried away, offering hurried apologies. At the same moment, the main character emerged from the confined area, grateful for the newfound space, and immediately noticed her classmate writhing on the floor, overwhelmed by intense pain. She inquired about the situation, but when he remained silent, the girl spoke up. She assured him that she would handle the remaining chores and encouraged him to get some rest. It wasn't until she stepped out of the room that she understood what had occurred. He realized that his joystick must have switched from red to blue much quicker than usual, and it was likely all because of her. His parents viewed her as an ideal child, consistently exceeding what they hoped for her. Not only did she excel academically, but she also shined in athletics. At the same time, frequently found herself involved in arguments, which caused her parents a great deal of concern. She constantly overheard her parents' disappointment, with her father accusing her mother of indulging her excessively, despite his frequent absence from their lives. Due to their demanding jobs, both rarely spent time at home. They were completely unaware of what was happening. On a certain day, the girl found herself caught in a fierce argument. She managed to overpower the other girls, causing them to flee in terror. She never depended on their approval or concern to shape her own path. On that particular day, she arrived at her house. She instinctively prepared for the scolding she knew was coming. Greeted her sister warmly with a smile, mentioning that dinner was already prepared. However, her pleasant demeanor faded as she caught sight of her sister's injuries. Concern filled her eyes as she questioned what had happened, but the younger girl brushed off the concern, believing her older sibling would never truly understand and deciding there was no use in explaining. As she made her way to the bathroom, her sister reached out and stopped her, insisting that she clearly wasn't all right and warning that showering in such a state would only worsen her pain. Suddenly, the scene shifted, and she found herself waking up on the school's rooftop. The memories of those moments lingered, haunting her thoughts. It was an awful sensation and, despite everything, she simply brushed it aside, making an effort to remain untroubled. She thought back to the time her sister had handed her a set of earrings, insisting over and over that they should have matching pairs. Had always longed for moments like that, wanting to feel close to her sister, but shy and moody nature made it hard for her to enjoy them. Had questioned her sister's intentions, only to have her sister retort sharply that didn't have to wear them if she didn't want to. Still, her sister made it obvious she would keep wearing her own earrings, enjoying the idea of matching with. Before leaving the room, her sister mentioned that one day would meet someone who was a better match for her. In the present. He clarified that he had sent her a message, because their class was being held in the audio-visual room. Her bag remained inside the classroom. This meant that avoiding her next class would be difficult for her. As he continued talking, thought back to her sister's words about eventually meeting someone who truly understood her. She admitted her true intention was to skip class and expressed her gratitude for his warning, suggesting he should go ahead without her. Just then, her phone vibrated, signaling a new message. Received a message from her sister, who asked if she could fill in for a cafe worker during the afternoon. At first, considered saying no, but changed her mind when her sister promised to pay her for the help. After letting the employee go home, his phone buzzed unexpectedly with a new message. The message had come from their mother. It was mentioned, seemingly, was destined to travel to the United States. Upon receiving the news, the girl remained at home and missed school for the whole week. Found himself growing anxious about her absence and decided to approach the teacher, hoping she might have some information. The teacher responded by mentioning that the girl's parents had reached out to the school to provide an explanation, though she couldn't share any details because the matter was private. Despite this, remained confused and couldn't figure out what had occurred. 3 days before, she had been at home. raised her voice at the glowing computer screen, expressing her strong refusal to continue her studies in the United States. Mother remained resolute, insisting on the move because it was easier for both parents, and they believed it was unacceptable to leave their underage daughter alone in Japan. She felt a surge of anger, believing the choice had been made without considering her wishes and that it lacked fairness. Even remarked on her sister's impressive academic record, suggesting that transferring to a different school would not be difficult for her and might actually offer a positive shift in surroundings. The situation only increased her anxiety. She felt indifferent toward both school and her family life. All that mattered to her was staying right where she was. Despite her feelings, her mother insisted she put aside her own desires and informed her that the family would be relocating the following month. The woman suggested that it would be best if she moved back in with her parents. Frustration built up inside her as the woman calmly advised her to consider the idea, then mentioned she needed to end the call because another meeting was about to begin. She let out a loud scream, insisting that the call be returned right away. Turned to her sister, curious about her next steps now that the conversation was over. Confessed she had promised to go as well, but with everything working out so perfectly there, and with even their parents supporting her decision, it seemed best for her to remain where she was. She offered an apology. Despite everything, her younger sister understood that she was not to blame. She felt completely unsettled by how quickly everything happened, and couldn't shake the feeling that their parents saw her as nothing more than extra baggage. The situation left everyone feeling frustrated. The older sister became anxious after hearing words and attempted to deny what had been said. Despite this, ignored her, insisting she needed some time alone to think. She then stepped outside to take a walk. She sat alone on the swing, moving back and forth softly in the quiet park. Overwhelmed by emotion, she began to cry and right then made up her mind to avoid going to school for the next several days. Heading back into the classroom, struggled to pay attention during English class since the subject always gave him trouble. Instead, he decided to text his friend, hoping she would tell him when she planned to return. Uncertain if he was being overly persistent, he couldn't help but worry about her absence. Despite spending so much time with him recently and encouraging him to join her in various activities, she still hadn't reached out to him. He had always believed they shared a friendship, yet now he couldn't help but feel foolish for longing for her as deeply as he did. The teacher noticed something was amiss and inquired about the problem. The teacher tried to get his focus, noticing that he was lost in thought. She wondered aloud if her lessons were truly that uninteresting, but quickly insisted otherwise. Deciding to redirect him, she instructed him to read from the assigned material, and although he struggled, he managed to comply. Experiences like this were not new to him, yet they served as a welcome distraction from thoughts of. As time passed, he encountered the girl once more, and seeing her brought a renewed sense of optimism to his days. Seated at the desk, he observed that she had not visited in quite some time. Pointed out that she had already missed a significant number of classes. She realized she might need to abandon her education entirely, allowing him to revert to his old, studious self. However, her tone carried a weight that made her words feel sincere. Admittedly, the main character did wish to focus on academics once more, but he understood it wouldn't come easily. At that moment, the girl began to clarify her thoughts. She had made up her mind to travel to the United States the following month, and upon hearing this, he was left in shock. Despite everything, he remained silent. The girl rose to her feet and quickly gathered her belongings. Pointed out that class was about to begin, signaling that she had finished saying all she needed to. Realizing it was time to leave, she sensed the boy would make an attempt to come after her. Standing outside the room, she believed he valued her presence, recalling how he had mentioned that returning to his usual routine would be difficult. She had already expressed everything important, so there was no reason for things not to be okay. Yet, unexpectedly, tears began streaming down her face as she stood in the corridor. Deep inside, she felt no desire to move to the United States. Within moments, the teacher entered the hall and instructed the students to prepare themselves. Acting on a sudden urge, quickly collected his belongings and muttered an apology to the woman who questioned his behavior. He offered only a vague promise to return shortly, which left her confused and a bit unsettled. although she made an attempt to keep him from leaving, was already out the door, forcing the woman to begin the class with the remaining students. Determined not to let leave for America with such an unsatisfactory explanation, rushed off. From the expression on their face, it appeared that. It was clear from her expression that the girl had no desire to leave, and he was eager to understand her true feelings about relocating. Despite his repeated attempts to reach her, she ignored his calls and left his messages unread, yet he continued to try. He was certain of the place where she would be. As expected, she rested on the familiar riverbank, the very spot where the two of them had first played hooky together. As soon as he spotted her, he immediately raised his voice to get her attention. Wondered aloud about the boy's reason for being in that place. As he paused, his chest heaved with effort, the exhaustion from running making it hard for him to breathe. Before offering an explanation, he admitted his curiosity about whether the rumors of her moving to the United States were true. Eyes blazing with anger confirmed the news, prompting to remark on how abrupt the decision seemed. The girl clarified that it was her mother's choice, not hers. Despite this, the boy protested, insisting that even parents shouldn't be able to make such life-changing decisions on her behalf. The girl ended the discussion, making it clear that she and the other person were not on familiar enough terms to discuss such matters. She believed this was the universe's way of paying her back for every class she had missed, and every rule she had broken to do as she pleased. Found the words unsettling as they echoed in his mind. He questioned her, wondering that if she was already aware of those things, why she hadn't resumed going to school as usual, and his words ended up upsetting her. He often felt that the girl occasionally went too far, but this sudden transformation was overwhelming for him. Rising to her feet, she wore a bright smile. She expressed her gratitude to the boy for always accompanying her when she chose to skip class. She reflected on the wonderful time she had shared with him before hurrying away. Called after her, questioning whether she planned to return to school, but the idea never crossed her mind. Her transfer meant she would no longer be a part of that world. Just before departing, wondered aloud if the boy felt relieved by the situation, since it meant he could revert to his usual, more reserved self, and she offered him her congratulations. Remained rooted in place, at a loss for words. He wondered if this truly marked the conclusion of their story, and whether he would ever see her again. Most of the time, she tended to be quite difficult. They had shared some enjoyable times with each other. He felt relieved knowing he managed to express that to her before she walked away. He loudly expressed his gratitude for being asked to join in skipping class. She admitted that, despite understanding it was wrong, she had allowed it because it seemed to calm him down. She struggled to find the right words to explain herself. Yet, it was clear that he wouldn't have chosen to leave the classroom alone if she hadn't played a part. For this reason, he felt compelled to show his appreciation. An uncomfortable quietness settled between the two, making the air feel heavy. Reacted as she typically did, questioning whether he was out of his mind for expressing gratitude over such a thing, a comment that left him feeling insulted. She subtly adjusted her facial expression. She conveyed her understanding of his point and expressed her gratitude. Additionally, she resolved to make another attempt at persuading her parents to allow her to remain. Later that evening, she made up her mind to reach out to her mother with a phone call. With just 10 minutes remaining before the meeting began, time was running out for them. The girl attempted to keep her composure as she expressed her regret. Earlier, actions had filled her with inspiration. Lowering her gaze, she told her mother about her wish to remain in that place, mentioning how spacious it was. The woman noted how the girl's behavior seemed completely unlike her normal self, almost as if she had become a different person. Still, the agreement between them was already settled. She was well aware that the girl had been missing school, coming home late, receiving absences, and getting into fights almost daily. The constant display of selfish actions had finally worn down her patience. The girl chose to tell the truth, explaining how she had informed her friend about her plans to move to the United States and leave school behind. On that very day, she had left the classroom, feeling completely uneasy and out of place. He trailed behind her but eventually managed to catch up, his timid nature and bookish habits marking him as both a coward and a bit of a nerd among his classmates. A person who stood out for their unique character. Someone whose background was nothing like hers, had expressed gratitude toward her. What had just happened could not be explained. She wanted to stay because of who had given it to her. Before she could finish speaking, her mother's assistant stepped in, cutting her off. Realizing her time had ended, the woman rose from her seat. The girl attempted to protest, but the woman calmly offered her explanation. She had already sold the home they once shared, signaling her willingness to give up. Her mother went on to say that she planned to speak with about arranging for the two girls to live together in Japan. She also expressed her happiness that her daughter had found a companion. After ending the call, she expressed a sense of relief, believing that letting go would ease her worries. Yet, even once the conversation was over, her eyes filled with tears as she expressed her gratitude to her. The following morning, sat in his classroom, carefully listening to the teacher's lesson. He remained unaware for a while, only realizing later. His chair sat unoccupied. He couldn't imagine how he would manage if the girl wasn't by his side. The past several months had seemed almost unreal, as if they were living inside a dream. He vividly recalled the moment she gazed at him while sprawled across the desk, her expression wordlessly urging him to ditch class with her. Waking from that dream proved to be a difficult challenge. At that moment, he became aware of a girl standing just beyond the classroom door. He wondered if she had truly been present. He wondered if his mind was playing tricks on him. However, his eyes brightened when he received a message from the girl, informing him that everything had been called off. As she often did, she extended an invitation for him to ditch class with her. He went so far as to propose that they remain and observe the lesson. Yet escaping her methods proved impossible. As he had done many times before, he trailed behind her up to the rooftop. Once they reached the top, the girl turned to him and spoke. She realized there was still work left to do with the move. While her mother had already arranged for professionals to handle the bulky furniture, she knew she would still require some assistance from a strong man to complete the remaining tasks. This meant that she depended on him. She found it simpler to reach out to a familiar person. On the day they relocated, the group gathered at the station. Seeing the girl dressed in casual attire struck everyone as a surprising change. They knew time was limited and understood they had to act quickly. He reminded himself to stay calm, knowing he was only invited to help out of convenience. Even so, the thought of visiting a girl's home for the first time, especially with her older sister present, made her feel uneasy about what she was wearing. When they eventually reached the house, the boy looked surprised, his eyes growing bigger when he realized the subway was just a short distance away. The apartment was spacious, especially considering only 2 people lived there. Greeted him warmly, her familiar smile lighting up her face. Could tell that the boy felt uneasy, so he offered an explanation, admitting that he had never visited anyone's home except for his own relatives. While expressed her gratitude for his assistance, he quickly assured her that he had no other plans that day and didn't mind helping. However, clarified that her thanks were not for his company that day, but rather for supporting her sister and helping her remain in Japan. He attempted to deny any wrongdoing, yet the woman felt compelled to share how her mother had expressed joy that her daughter had found a trustworthy friend. She was clearly referring to him, leaving no doubt in anyone's mind, for the small. Felt thankful that her sister had chosen him as a friend, especially since they were already acquainted. She requested his help to look after her. At that moment, reached out to her with a call. He observed the pair as they spoke, their conversation replaying in his mind. He wondered if he was truly the friend they had spoken about, and the idea of the 2 of them being together already seemed odd. He reminded himself to look after her carefully. He snapped back to reality as his friend's voice interrupted his thoughts. They mentioned that it was time to begin, though the situation felt unusual. He believed his only purpose was to help out, so he chose not to dwell on it. She passed him a utility knife, expecting him to begin sorting through the taped-up boxes. When called her name, she exited the room, leaving behind the impression that he wasn't particularly skilled. He had been instructed to unfasten only the seals on the box. He would transport the items to a different room, knowing that giving in to his curiosity and glancing inside would surely lead to regret. Because he was so compliant, he began his tasks right away, never once asking questions or challenging. made her way to C, who encouraged her not to hold back and to feel more comfortable around her. She needed to place greater faith in others, her expression softening into a gentle smile. However, the girl... Carol questioned her, her words abruptly shattering the gentle atmosphere that had started to form. She was not easy to understand. She enjoyed her sister's warmth, but believed her sister ought to be more thoughtful with her words. She used the moment when they were alone to express her curiosity. Someone had persuaded the girl to remain enrolled at that school. Understood the motive behind her actions. It all came down to that particular phrase. Expressed gratitude to her, acknowledging all that she had done. She felt uncertain about revealing that information. She appeared noticeably uneasy. Since her sister had already begun to suspect that there was more going on between them, she firmly any hint of flirtation. She was told to quit making such remarks. Listened closely to the discussion, his face flushed red like a tomato. Retreated into the bathroom and turned the lock behind her. Feeling her cheeks flush with embarrassment, she searched desperately for a way to slip away unnoticed. She couldn't understand why her heart was racing so quickly. In that moment, the main character had reached the final box. He found it strange that his friend, who had promised to return soon, was now running unusually late. As he walked, he accidentally stumbled over a box that had been left on the floor. Worry crept in as he silently wished the box did not contain anything breakable. Fortunately, the contents appeared unbreakable, offering some relief. As the girl stepped inside, she managed to catch him in the act. He attempted to sort through the box, picking up a few unique garments, which caught her off guard and left her feeling both startled and embarrassed. He mentioned that when he stumbled over the box, everything inside spilled onto the floor, so he was only making sure nothing was damaged, and it all appeared to be fine. After that, she struck him firmly, and he continued to say sorry for the uncomfortable moment. Eventually, expressed her gratitude to him for assisting her. The boy, his face puffy and swollen, expressed regret for the problems he had created. The woman requested that her sister escort the man to the exit. Without exchanging any words, the pair made their way to the station together. Since leaving her house, nothing had felt normal, and now they were nearly at the subway. He realized he had to speak up. He expressed his gratitude to her for agreeing to meet him somewhere other than at school. When they reached their destination, the girl kept her back to him as she said farewell, but the boy couldn't leave without offering another apology for what had happened before. The girl came to a sudden halt, causing to feel uneasy and anxious. He spun back toward him and calmly assured him that he didn't need to worry, since it wasn't an issue. He wanted to know whether she was certain, and when she nodded in affirmation, he proceeded. She offered him a genuine farewell, and he felt a sense of relief knowing she was willing to speak with him once more. Realizing it was time to leave, he prepared to make his way home. He had no way of knowing that had seen everything that had happened between them. They felt tense and uneasy, their mind racing with questions about the conversation happening and the reason for meeting up during a day meant for rest.